All right, guys, welcome back to the Untitled Fitness Podcast. Today on the show, I have Joe Sullivan. Many of you guys probably already know who Joe is, but Joe has been probably like one of the OGs in the sport. One of the best squatters in the entire world. Really, really excellent coach with a lot of really strong athletes, and I think that Joe has a very unique perspective compared to most other powerlifters because of the amount of time he's spent in the sport and the clients he has coached over the years. And Joe has had, I think, about every single possible experience you could have in the sport. And so I think that Joe is just somebody that we can all really learn from because I think that when we're talking about overcoming adversity and whatnot, I think Joe is probably like one of the best people to talk about. And that's one of the things I actually wanted to get into. First was just asking you about like why you still train despite dealing with a lot of setbacks in your powerlifting career, because if anybody is aware, Joe has had a very rough go of it the past 4 years. I think it's really interesting to examine like advanced lifters why they still train even when progress is slow, because most lifters burn out once the progress stops
Mm.
being linear.
Well, personally, I could make jokes because like one of the immediate jokes is like, oh, I'm in too deep. I don't know what else to do. This has realistically taken up over half my life at this point. I started powerlifting. My first powerlifting competition was in 2007 when I was 14 years old. I'm 31 now. It's literally, quite literally over half my life. So it is a giant component of who I am and kind of like what I refer back to. Like people mention core memories. This is like a core activity. This is something that I genuinely, whether it is competing in powerlifting or just training in some capacity, I can't imagine my life without it. And I can't imagine being the person that I am without learning and experiencing how to not only be disciplined, continue on, work towards an end goal over a long period of time, but also accept the fact that everything isn't going to go perfectly. Plan A is never the plan that allows us to reach the end goal. We have to be willing to adapt and overcome. And there's a reason my coaching business, the name is the AOD Collective. It's adapt or die. The singular like truth of the matter when it comes to anyone pursuing any type of long-term goal is the fact that you will have to not only be unwavering in your belief that you can reach that goal, but also willing to be flexible to adjust the plan, work the plan, and continue to work towards the goal, but not be so married to some like original idea or expectation, timeline, whatever, that as soon as something goes wrong or doesn't work out the way that you want it to, you completely bail on the plan or the objective itself. I started powerlifting when I was 2007, and I never thought that I would be like I'd hold an all-time world record, let alone break one 6 times in a row. But but after doing it and doing it the first time, I kind of, because that's the big thing. We all kind of like when I broke the record for the first time, I believed or kind of had a more immature belief that I think a lot of people consider when they set a goal is that when they reach the goal, they're going to be done. They're going to be like, I have accomplished my thing. I get my little party hat, the fireworks go off over my head, and I'm like, all right, I'm happy now, And that's absolutely not the case. Like we fall in love, at least personally, and I think a lot of people who would listen to this podcast or decide to be coaches or at least like dedicated to something, we fall in love with the goal, but it's not actually the goal that we're desiring. And it is, but it's not, the goal is not the entirety of the experience. The actual process to get there and the things that we accomplish and conquer along the way are really like what build us up into who we are. And on top of that, every time you achieve something, like somebody who's listening to this, like Adam, I know you're currently dealing with a back injury, right?
Yep.
The stronger you get, the more liable you are to be thrown shit that like you feel like you don't deserve or that you like, man, I did everything right. Why the fuck is that? Why does this keep happening? I've
That's
had
exactly been this past year. Like it's been like one thing after the other. I'm like, why? Like I was just getting strong again.
and that phraseology right there or verbiage or whatever the fucking word is, the phrase that you want to use, but that one thing after the other. Everybody loves to say, oh, it's one thing after the other, as if there's a huge negative connotation with that one thing after the other. Well, guess what, Adam? everybody that's listening to this, speaking from experience, the guy who's torn both menisci in both my knees. I've torn my pec, torn my quad, two herniated discs in my cervical spine, two herniated discs in my lumbar spine, had nerve damage that prevented the use of my upper body. I've had thing after thing. I've missed weight, bombed out of meets, fucking disqualified from meets, a bunch of different things. Litigation, loss of friendships, divorce, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like I could run through the Rolodex of all these things that I've dealt with. And that is the nature of life. It's one thing after the other. I hope it's one thing after the other, because if stuff stopped happening, I'd be fucking dead, and so would you be. When we decide that we're not, that this thing is a core aspect of our life, and it's what we kind of not only rely on to make ourselves feel good, but also to like give us an avenue or a vehicle to kind of like seek out fulfillment, and ideally, if you're a coach, which I know you are, and people who are listening, ideally seek out fulfillment through the service and the help of others. The only option is to continue on. I saw this really great, it's one of those stupid little Instagram clips, like where you're just doing a time suck and doom scrolling and whatever, but it was really, really good. This guy was giving a presentation on how we start off with this unwavering belief. Him and his kid were playing a game, and the dad kept beating the kid, and the kid was just getting annihilated. I think it was like chess or something, and like 5 games in a row, the kid lost. And the dad was like, "Why don't we stop? Like we're done." And the kid was like, "I don't want to stop." Dad's like, "Why don't you want to stop?" The kid says, "The game. I don't want the game to end until I win." And that right there is the mentality that you have to have, and that I have, for all the negative that comes along with it, because there's a lot of adversity, a lot of strife, a lot of hard conversations and shitty things that you have to bite down and deal with. If you believe in life, whether it's pursuing an athletic goal, business achievements, helping others, or whatever else it may be, if you get that into your head that the game doesn't end until you win, then you will never stop playing the game, and you will never stop chasing it until you feel as though that you've won. And that's where I'm at. I love this game. I love powerlifting. I love being an athlete myself. I love coaching people to get to the dreams and the goals that they have. And I just don't want to stop until I feel as though I have accomplished everything that I set out to accomplish. And sometimes that means readjusting the goals, because at the current moment, I haven't said anything publicly. I'll say it on the podcast. I just won't write it down, because who knows who will deal with it. But I did recently injure my knee. I tore my other meniscus coming back to powerlifting. And it's another thing. It's another thing. And you can take a moment, sit in it for a day or two, be upset about it, be pissed off about it, say, God damn it, I don't deserve this. Well, guess what? Nobody deserves a goddamn thing. You get what you get, and you deal with it. That's why the name is Adapt or Die, man. And I know you're doing the same thing with figuring out everything that you can do, can't do, and everything in between with your back, and continuing to trudge along through the mud and sludge and fucking bullshit to get to your goal. And I'm right there with you. And anybody who is listening to this probably feels the same. And they either believe I'm going to do whatever it takes, or they say, I think I'm going to do whatever it takes. And as soon as they're faced with this adversity, they go do BJJ, bodybuilding, running, or just move on to something else that they want to. And there's nothing wrong with it, but that's not who I am. So
It's interesting that you say that, because like it is that for me. Like it's like, it is playing that the game, and my whole perspective is like, while I am frustrated, and like, I have some days I'm just like, man, I just want to train like how I normally would, and how I know that I do feel when I am on. For me, it really is just like focusing on, well, I can still train, and that's a huge blessing. Like I love training, and like this is the thing that really saved my life from anorexia, which is the most deadly mental illness you could possibly have. And I'm addicted to that, aspect of like bettering myself. And I think that another thing for me is like I have this belief. I'm like, I will deadlift 800 pounds one day. I will squat 300 kilos. I will, bench 200 kilos. Like it's going to happen, and I'm going to figure out, and like you said, adapt or die, and really just focus on what is just going to take right now to get there, and just embracing right now instead of trying to like run away from it has been a big mindset change. Because like I've had a lot of people ask like, well, if your back sore when you're squatting and deadlifting to some extent, like why are you doing that? Why don't you just take a month off? I'm like, because I'm going to get weaker if I do that. And when I come back, I'm still going to be in pain because I'm way more, untrained to the movement pattern. And I love squatting and deadlifting. So I'm going to
Mhm.
still try doing it in some way, shape, or form. And just, I'm addicted to that aspect of progress. And as a coach too, yeah, it's like, I think it's so important to lead from the front. I could not be a coach and tell my clients how to work through an injury, or a setback if I didn't go through the stuff. And this year, it's like, it's tough looking back, Joe, and saying, you know what, I was probably stronger last year than I am right now, and that sucks to know. But it's also like it's a great learning opportunity and saying, well, what went wrong this year? Like, what changed about myself? What do I need to do? Are there some things that I need to overcome, and some demons? And am I willing to make those changes? And um, back off if I have to, or need to do more work. And I think that's another good thing about powerlifting is that it can teach you so much about yourself and
Mhm.
life in general. That I've done sports, like other sports. I've done music at a high level. Like I was accepted to like Berkeley and Juilliard, like when I had auditioned on bass, and but that was never hard for me. Like music was never hard for me. I never really struggled with it. I've always been good at it. Powerlifting, I've had to grind like every second for it, and I think that's why it's mattered so much to me and so many other people is that you can't cheat it, and it's hard. We look at people like these outliers like Bob Matthews and Joe Borenstein and whatnot right now. I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's great for them. Guess what? They're going to have a setback too. It happens to everyone. And you look at and I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that setbacks are normal, and you have to and expect that. And then you can see a lot about a person's character with how they respond to that setback.
100%, dude. And that's like, I think you having that viewpoint and having that perspective is one of the best things that you could ever experience and like learn from or use and utilize to be a better coach. Because like I talk about it in the sense that like while I look back on my own training career and I look back on all the things that I did wrong, because I speak from a very reserved, responsible, conservative, health oriented, longevity based perspective now. That's Joe in 2024 speaking to his clients and to the athletes that respect him and ask questions about what they should do. Joe in 2017, when I was just the athlete and didn't had a couple of in-person clients, but nothing really crazy in regards to like coaching or like leadership, I was like, I will do whatever it takes and I will fucking kill myself if I need to in order to achieve these goals. But not saying that's the case, but let's say there's individuals who experience a quicker come up or like a improvement in their skills, or they come into their time as like a peak athlete more quickly than someone else. As soon as they experience that first adversity, that thing that is going to demand their perspective to be shifted towards understanding that, like, what's the old cliche, like we make plans and God laughs. As soon as they understand that like their plans don't mean anything in the long run, and their natural disposition towards strength or how strong or accomplished they have gotten up to this point doesn't matter beyond it, that is what kind of either turns people into more mature, more thoughtful, and more insightful athletes slash coaches slash people, or that's that like impetus that will cause a lot of people to have a great deal of perspective shift and even find themselves pushed out of powerlifting or whatever it is that they've decided to chase. Like, I mean, how long have you been competing, Adam?
I started competing in 2019.
Yeah, and like that's awesome. Like I fucking love that. But like when I've seen like having the benefit of being in the sport as long as I have, like in 2007, like dude, I could literally come up with like a list of just a million people where it's like I remember this guy who said he was going to do this thing or came out and kicked ass at this meet and then just fell off immediately. Like this is the benefit, the positive and the negative simultaneously of powerlifting is that it's like the clearest or one of the clearest situations in life where it is a direct like one-to-one effort to result situation. Like you get what you put in, you get out what you put in is the phrase. As you work, as you chase after your goals and after you like do the things that you're supposed to do, you can see direct, tangible results from it as a power lifter, whether it's 5 pounds on the bar, your arms are a little bigger, you feel a little stronger, whatever. This is one of the best thing, like lifting weights in general, I think is one of the best things any human can do, or any, or like that activity is one of the best things they can participate in. And because of that, it has a draw to a great deal of people. And as they go through it, as they face that first adversity, they're either going to use it to become better, like everything else in this sport, or they're just going to be like, I don't want to deal with this because it doesn't mean that much to me. And I think it means that much to me and you, probably the people listening to this, because they're listening to a podcast about powerlifting on whatever random day of the week they're doing so. But it's just interesting to observe it and go along. And I bet you injuring your back and dealing with this and working through it, and whether you overcome it in a week or in 6 months, or if you have to readjust and reframe your perspective yet again, that whatever happens, whether it is you having to like achieve the goals eventually or understand that there's a pivot required away from those particular goals, and maybe then it becomes, I just want to coach as many 800-pound deadlifters as I possibly can. If you didn't have that injury, you wouldn't be in the position where you could help people to do that. And that's that reframing of perspective that has really helped me incredibly, and has made me not only like, I believe, a better athlete, but also a better coach, because I can then go on and help like talk to people and be like, hey, these are the, if this is the undying, like unwavering goal that we are chasing, we will do whatever it takes to get there. Will, and whatever it takes doesn't mean doing more. Sometimes it means backing off, sometimes it means not loading the spine, sometimes blah blah blah, whatever the situation is. But then also, if you exhaust all options and you're still talking to an athlete, or you have to communicate with someone who puts their trust in you, and it's like, hey, I really think we need to shift this perspective even further and maybe like re-examine or redefine the goals that we're looking at, because I've experienced the things that I've experienced, and because you will have experienced and are currently experiencing the things you have, that is a desirable quality for someone to have when you're communicating with a person in that situation, because like it's it's hard. Like just because I believe that I'm going to squat 1,000 pounds one day in reps or whatever doesn't mean that it is absolutely going to happen. I can say I have everything. I have every bit of what is going to be required to do it. I have all of what it takes. But sometimes fate, universe, God, whatever, doesn't let those plans like unroll as the way in the way that we desire them to, and that perspective can either crush you and be like, oh my God, what the fuck, or it can help you become an even more mature and better leader in this space and lead from the front, like you were talking about.
Yeah, I think that with what you were saying there about like it having like to reframe your perspective. Like I always try to like tell my clients, okay, well, this happened because of X, Y, Z. Let's examine why, and let's learn from this. Let's adapt our approach and our strategy to see, okay, well, what can we learn from this? Like, what do we need to have? Like, I've had like as far as like injuries have happened to me, I've dealt with pec injuries and shoulder injuries. Come to find that was a technique issue. And the funny thing is that my friend Brendan came here for Raw Nationals, and he saw how I bench press. He's like, dude, you don't do any arching. Like that's why your pecs hurt. And like, how are you benching like 170 kilos? I'm like, I don't know, felt different. But like then Joe Stanek, I hire him, and he's just like, oh, like now, dude, this is how you arch. This is how you set up a little bit better, and understanding that more. And it's like, oh wow, then now I don't have any pain when I'm benching. I've strained my lats. Going too hard. I had a very hot streak of deadlift progress in 2021 after I deadlifted 700 pounds. Just had so much momentum, and I felt like a nagging tug on that spot. And I just kept going because I was stubborn, but I didn't really know how bad it was. Then one day, just last set of six with 573, it tore. And then I learned, okay, well, I can't do as much deadlift volume. I have to cap my progression. I have to change a little bit about how I'm, using my lats and deadlift specifically. And then like I've had a back issues before, and it was because of the training split layout was not good for my body. Like I can't handle a really heavy loading squat
Mhm.
in close proximity to a heavy deadlift. And it's like a lot of these things is just like, okay, well, this is just like a learning experience, and you can choose if you want to, change things and adapt them for the long term. But I think what you said about like using it as a way to like serve other people, I think that's a one really good way to like do things. I do believe like in sort of karma in some sense. I think that if you are trying to help other people, it doesn't mean life's going to be easier, get you what you want, but at least it's going to help you feel a little bit better about your situation. Um, and like one thing is I also realized too is like looking back over like my best periods of progress, like it's just been slow and steady. And it seems like all of a sudden at like one point after like two blocks of just seemingly nothing is happening and being really patient, then I start seeing progress and sort of like expecting that and seeing like these trends. Um, I think that's not uncommon with most powerlifters too. Johnny Kaufman and I were talking when he was here a few months ago, and about like his deadlift explosion from like what like 850 to like 900. And he's
Mhm.
like, dude, like sometimes you're just chipping along, you're being patient, all of a sudden you just get a lucky break and it
Mhm.
sticks around.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And like, because like you look at people, even in that like phrase, like lucky break, like it's funny because it seems like how lucky is it if Johnny, for instance, has been working for a decade or whatever, however long he's been doing it. How lucky is it if you've just been chopping wood, doing the monotonous, mundane work, and then finally it takes off? Like, is that lucky or is that just a testament to being patient and continuing to work towards the objective? It's like who knows, and it just depends. With that, the answer depends on the perspective, because even with me, like I had my like one of my breakout meet performances at the 2017 US Open, where I came in second place to Yuri Belkin and I almost beat him, just missed 804 on strength on with the deadlift, and it wasn't even a grip issue like it normally is. But like people were like, "Oh, Joe Sullivan like came out of nowhere," and it's like, well, that's 2017. I've been competing since 2007. What do you mean I came out of nowhere? And it's perspective again. Like anything looks like an overnight success if you do it big enough, and with you, with any of your clients, like, or for going back to how you said, like, you can't handle like a high intensity in relation to one rep max squat in close proximity to your deadlift. You just looking at you, like you're a very long limbed person who is likely more bent over than someone who has a little bit more mechanically advantageous leverages like me, who could probably handle heavier, like harder squats or harder deadlifts just due to the nature of my build. But because you experienced that and you ran face first into that like fatigue wall, you want to know what I bet you're not going to do? Next time you have a client who
That
has long limbs, be like, oh, let's just do a heavy squat and deadlift in the same week. You're going to think, wait a minute, that sucked ass for me. I'm not going to make that guy do that. And that person is going to have more consistent progress with less impediments and less moments where they're like, I can't get out of fucking bed because I feel like dog shit. And they're just gonna get better results over a longer period of time and stay more than likely stay more injury free than they would have otherwise. And that's because of your experience. It sucked when you were in it. It sucks that you're in it now, but you can help someone suck less and not experience the things and the adversity that you're facing by taking that and then using it in the service of others. And that's how I approach everything. Because if I didn't, I'd be like, what? Woe is me. How dare I have all these fucking injuries and all this shit?
Yeah, but now that you have that, you know exactly how to like work through it, and that's
Mhm.
psychology. Like I went to school for like athletic training, and like the biggest thing that I realized working with athletes that were hurt is that like it was that crisis of identity was probably like the hardest one to deal with. Like if it wasn't like the actual injury, it wasn't that like people were like, okay, that sucks. I'm gonna, it's like the fear of the unknown after that, like what happens next. And
Mhm.
really, one of the things that we had to really get through the head is like, hey, that doesn't matter. It's just one day after the other. Do your rehab, embrace the process, and if you're patient enough and your body is ready to heal, it's going to heal, and you can't rush
Mhm.
things. And one of my friends, Jeremy, you're talking about this because Jeremy's had a breakout like progress seemingly, but if you
Mhm.
watch how he trains, it's very slow and steady, and not every block he's PRing. Some blocks he's just building momentum. He was actually in a very similar spot to me before he started working with Rondell Hunt, where he was repeatedly running into fatigue issues and having issues with just keeping training momentum is, he could get hurt. And I'm trying to get him on my podcast to talk about this, but he said that he had, I think, like a good 3 month period, like he was not pushing at all. It was
Mhm.
just like ingraining in like some good movement patterns and um having really some maximal stuff, just like nothing pushing, just to like let his body heal. Because he was like, I was just so fatigued. It took like
Mhm.
that long to like feel better. And then like now he has like this push and pull in his training where he's number one, he's like not training as heavy on average, like his average intensity is a lot lower. And then he has like blocks where he intentionally pushes and blocks where he intentionally does not push hard, even when he feels good. And I want to ask, in your experience working with really strong guys, like if that's something that you've seen very frequently as people get stronger, is like you can't push like as frequently for that part of progress slash like the training on paper might look easier because like they're so strong.
Absolutely. And because that's not just about and I don't think you're thinking this, but just for the listeners, like it's a common misconception when someone gets like strong enough, and I'm like air quoting like strong enough or too strong or whatever, where they reach some level of strength where you kind of have to approach their training differently, not due to their level of strength, but because in turn that strength brings with it a greater degree of fatigue that they can cause. They can literally, especially when you add in PEDs, because with with someone who's on PEDs or with someone who's naturally strong or the guy who's on PEDs and is also naturally strong and just really good at stuff, you have to think about the metabolic damage and the actual fatigue that you can incur due to the damage and the recruitment of those muscles. PEDs and steroids in general are going to upregulate your ability to like recruit motor units, which is like the neurological aspect, like the things in your muscles that make shit go. It's by taking steroids and by taking certain anabolic steroids, you can literally just cause more muscular damage to be incurred. That is also going to happen as you get stronger. As you get stronger, a lot of someone's strength is due to the neuromuscular adaptations rather than actual like muscle hypertrophy. You literally just get better at using the tissue that you have by maxing out or getting closer to maxing out the number of motor units that you can recruit in sync at the same time. When you do that, that causes way more fatigue. So somebody like me, who is an all-time world record holder and very good at using my quads and my legs to push weight up, I have to understand that because of that, I can cause more muscular damage than someone who is, let's say, 2 years into their training career and is pretty good at lifting, but they just don't have that like metabolic physiological framework to draw from like I do, so that that person can then handle more fatigue, more exposure to the stimulus. They may not need to deload as often. But to get back to the point, is the guys who are stronger, the guys who are in those situations where you have to look at training not from like how much can they do, but how much can they recover from. That is where some of the best progress can be made. Because, for instance, it's an easy example. Look at Patrick McGuire and Justin Zottel, the two super heavyweights that I have going into the American Pro. Both of those guys have realistic opportunities to not only, Justin has a realistic chance to break into a 2,400 pound total. Patrick has a realistic chance to break into a 2,500 pound total. Those are insane numbers. But prior to starting working with them both about 2 years ago, they had consistently run into periods of time or periods of training where they couldn't manage their fatigue. They would have good runs and then be like, I can't fucking move. I'm so beat up. I can't handle this level of stimulus. And when I started handling their training, both even more so with Justin, less so with Patrick, but both on both sides, they both communicated to me and said, "Man, I feel like I'm not doing anything. I feel like I'm not training like I normally want to." And there's a degree of trust that has to occur there. But with that said, as you get stronger and as you get better at something, whether it's powerlifting or any sport that you're participating in, your ability or your necessity to do that actual specific sport activity drops off in your training because they're both very technically proficient. They don't need to relearn how to do a squat every week. They don't need to relearn how to do a bench or a deadlift every week. They have that movement pattern ingrained. So why not train the things that they need to get better at, such as like a portion of the movement, a particular muscle group, or whatever, and decrease the amount of fatigue that we're accumulating due to that exposure so that they can train for a longer period of time, get more stimulus out of those things. And then when we do introduce the high cost, high energy expenditure, like big heavy squat, big heavy bench, big heavy deadlift, we only need to do it one or two or three times leading into the actual powerlifting competition itself to drum up that technical proficiency and that specific skill of doing that thing, but not causing that degree of damage or fatigue accumulation over a period of time. Like if you talk to Justin or Patrick or Briani, even they don't go heavy often, but when they do go heavy, it is very appreciable. It's just the minimal touches to make the adaptation occur, but ideally bring about as little fatigue accumulation or as little like residual impact to the rest of their training as possible.
I think that's an interesting point in general with like PEDs and how they change training and the overall response. Because how I've always explained to people is I'm um like it's like it's actually in some ways a lot easier to overtrain on PEDs because of the psychology changes. Then like number one, you want to just go 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 go. You want to go hard. You can just push through it. Like for me, it's like I will if I'm non just sports TRT, I'm just like oh, that kind of hurt. I don't know about that. As if I'm on blast, I'm just like, holy crap, I don't like that. Fuck you. And then I just go as hard as I possibly can, or I can feel some pain. I can push through it harder. I
Mhm.
also notice that like my, like the same similar thing is like my output in all my sets is much higher. And so I just can't like recover the exact same way. And then not only that, like I'm just more like proficient like everything that has to do with like motor learning. Like I learn the songs on the guitar easier. I don't need to practice my deadlift as much or my squat or my bench. Like it's just kind of always there, as opposed to like when I was training natural. Like I really needed that frequency, and I also needed to train on average higher intensity because I couldn't recruit my physiology to this the same extent. Um, and I think it's an interesting topic about like um, as far as like they said that they weren't doing that much of anything. I know that Rihanna has been on like record like I know this is a while ago. She like benches like once a week, which is like
Mhm.
not like people will hear that they're like, oh my gosh, how? And that's not uncommon though with a lot of these really strong athletes who don't need that technique because how I view it is like if you look at a lot of the current programs that are on the more the natural side, especially, they have such frequent exposure because they are motor morons in comparison to
Mhm.
people that are enhanced. They need that more frequent stoking of like the technical groove, whereas
Mhm.
somebody who is enhanced just doesn't need it because they kind of remember how to always squat. And I bet you're also programming in other things, like you said, that are just easier to recover from, like a half squat or like a machine chest press or a dumbbell bench press, or maybe just something that has more of like the it's less taxing on the same structures, like a variation on like a block pull or something
Mhm.
like that. And I think that's one thing that I think that is lost is that there's so many different ways to program. And I think that my biggest gripe with most coaches in the USAPL and Natty coaching scene is they very much think there are these hard and fast rules. And I'm just like, I don't think so. I think that I've seen everything work for clients. I've had clients that I have developed like once every other week, and that's what they need. They make great, great, great progress like that. I have clients who are natural even who their secondary squat is a hack squat because
Mhm.
it makes their lower back recover better. I have clients that also bench once a week and they make progress.
Mhm. Exactly. And that's exactly it, dude. You took the words out of my mouth because there are no rules in this. Like this is where the like there are rules. There are physiological rules, biological rules, chemical rules, like things that we can't bypass that like have to happen. But when it comes to the actual application of training and like the benefit that people get from training, this is where it's the art of coaching and the art of training. Like if I told someone that Bree's a female and she's making Or if I told random USAPL coach that Bree is a female and making awesome gains benching one time a week, they would probably be like, "That's insane! Like that's just because she's on drugs." And it's like, okay, yeah, the PEDs are for sure a factor, but for this particular female who is at like I don't want to call her natural, but like on a TRT and HRT dose of like 3 milligrams of test prop a week for 11 months out of the year, 10 months out of the year, most likely. It's a factor, but it's more towards the side of this is just the tool that we have chosen that is most beneficial for Briani, and understanding that every situation is different. Because if Briani wasn't Brie and she was Becky, who is a natural girl who is 125 pounds, that individual who has only been training 2 years, that particular person may benefit more from having a higher frequency exposure to the bench press due to her need to acclimate towards motor patterns and actually learning the technique, and then not just learning the technique, but learning how to use their physiology in the context of that technique, learning how to push harder. And then you could get into the conversation where it's like, well, we don't really need to do straight up like top end high intensity in relation to 1 rep max bench press to do that. Why don't we do a superset and then go into a bench press to do that? Or why don't we do a superset into a dumbbell bench press if the person has this chronic shoulder issue that is only enhanced when they have a barbell in their hands, but it doesn't bother them when they have dumbbells? And then why don't we work around? It's outcome oriented thinking. This is the best way that I could describe all of this conversation, and any conversation that I think a coach would benefit from, or the biggest conversation that I think most coaches would benefit from, is stop thinking about the path to get to the goal and then like not worshiping the path, but being like, these are my tools, these are the steps that I take, so how do I take these steps to get to this goal? Get rid of that, throw that out. Think about it's a pick and play. It's your own Lego set that you can decide wherever the fuck anything goes, as long as you ultimately get to the goal, you get to the outcome. If I focus on the outcome and I look at things from an outcome oriented perspective, then I understand that whatever I need to implement in between point A and point B is going to get me to meet between those 2 points. It doesn't matter if I do a high box squat against bands. It doesn't matter if I do tempo work. It doesn't matter if I do tempic work in combination with concentric tempo work, or if I do a machine, or if I do this particular superset. What tool is going to be the most beneficial in this particular context with this particular individual to get me towards this goal? And whatever happens, that's what that person is paying you to do. If we're in a service-based business, a service-based profession, which ultimately coaches are, why do we give any level of a fuck about how we get the person to that goal? They don't care. They don't mind. If I looked at Patrick and I told him, hey, you're going to bench press 800 pounds and take the all-time world record, but you're only going to be able to do it if you bench press once a month, and every other opportunity you just fucking push really hard into a brick wall. Trust me, I swear it's going to work. It seems weird, but if you do it, you'll get to that goal. Do you think Patrick would be like, well, that doesn't seem typical, but I'm not going to do it, even though he said it's absolutely going to do, even though it's absolutely going to work, and there's no doubt in my mind that it will work? Absolutely not. He would do that because the goal is more important than the method by which they reach it. And we all, as coaches, need to understand that the methods don't matter. The golden rule in performance and the golden rule, the golden standard in coaching is getting results. The results matter. I don't care how we get there. And I don't think any good coach would really care or mind how you get there, as long as it works, doesn't cause any unnecessary stress or damage to the athlete. So like they're not getting hurt. And as long as it's responsible, great. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you said it so perfectly. It's just like, why do you really care? Like, why do you have these boxes, and why do you think that every human should respond the same when they don't? Now, a lot of the times, these people that are the high level USABL coaches, they work with the genetic elite. Well,
Mhm.
most people aren't the genetic elite, and so why are we treating them like they are the genetic elite and whatnot? Like, hell, like, man, because a lot of times too with like injuries, it's like it could be a big blessing because I stumbled on this approach for this person. that I never thought would like work. Like I was forced to lower down their overall systemic volume because like they just couldn't handle it. Like they were just so beat up, or they just didn't feel like training, or we lower down their training frequency because they were super stressed out like with their job, and they start
Mhm.
making better progress. And I'm like, cool, we're just going to keep running with that. And I think lots of times a big reason for why plateaus are such a thing and why they can be such a big thing is that coaches are not willing to completely change their approach when it is appropriate. I think it's good to like to make incremental changes, like if the athlete isn't like reporting really big issues. But if an athlete's reporting like I kind of always feel fatigued in my back, I didn't really tell you about it, but like I always feel a little bit like fatigued from squatting twice a week. Why the fuck are we not doing like a belt squat or a half squat, something that's going to be more forgiving on that? Because like how I view it, Joe, is like if you unless you absolutely need that technical practice, it doesn't matter. Volume is volume. Stimulus is stimulus. Your muscles are dumb pieces of meat that only understand tension and stress. And lots of times too, like I'm a big fan of like less specific work in general and bodybuilding. Like I feel like people get so much more out of that in a lot of sense too than like doing like an RPE like six bench press for like 20 sets, which is what
Mhm.
you see in a lot of these programs. And I would actually I've had conversations with Lyle McDonald about this. He's like, I feel like that's why like powerlifters have all these nagging aches and pains because they're drilling the exact same movement pattern over and over and over again because they need to grease a groove. And this isn't Olympic weightlifting. And my Olympic weightlifters, by the way, we have periodization where literally they're like, okay, you're going to be orthopedically like destroyed going into your meet. Then what do we do after it? We barely touch the barbell because they need it because they're like my shoulders hurt, my elbows hurt, my hips hurt, my glutes hurt, like all this stuff, and you have to take a time off.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly, dude. And that's one of the biggest like that what you said where it's like your muscles don't have a brain. Like your biceps don't have a brain. Like we muscles can't think. We think in relation to how we're using our muscles and we feel and perception is our perception, but all muscles can identify as work. It's physics, tension and contraction paired with some chemical conversations that occur that cause shit to happen. If I'm if you so for instance, do you know who Charlie Weingroff is?
Yeah,
Okay, so shout out to Charlie and everybody who's listening to this. Go follow Charlie on Instagram because he's one of the way that he speaks is admirable to me. Like I look up to the man and the way that he presents information. And one of his videos recently was like exactly the conversation that I've had with people, and it just stuck out immediately. And I was like, I love this because it ties into that outcome oriented thinking. If we think about what is a bench press like what is a bench press going to do? Like what does that how does that make you strong? We think about it. We're pushing the barbell up in a horizontal pattern off of our chest using the contraction of our pecs, delts, and everything else to just extend our shoulder forward and then thereby extend our elbows, locking out our triceps. That is a horizontal pressing movement. We talk about bench press as being a very important, very integral piece of a powerlifter's program due to a lot of different things. One, due to the technical specificity and like the technical demands of doing the bench press on the platform, but then also training the muscles so that we can hypertrophy the muscles and have a better neuromuscular connection inside of that contraction and inside of that particular technique that we are practicing. Two separate things. If we nail the one side where they have very technically proficient movement and they don't have any energy leaks or bad technique, they have a good arch, they have everything mechanically figured out, and it's very nice. Then, if we go into the perspective where it's okay, this is a horizontal pressing movement that stresses pecs, shoulders, triceps. If that's the case, I don't really need to think about it as a bench press when I'm orienting this person's program. I need to think about what horizontal pressing motion that is training the pecs, shoulders, and triceps is going to be the most appropriate to achieve this hypertrophic or tension oriented metabolic stimulus. If it's a bench press, fuck yeah. Let's run the fuck out of bench press. If this particular person can't handle that much stimulus due to when they bench press because some type of shoulder issue, or they are a guy like me who's been doing it over half their life and they just have chronic aches and pains that have accumulated over the years, don't just think, okay, bench press technical specificity, bench press hypertrophic and metabolic and tension based demands. Think about, okay, I have the technical proficiency over here, maintain minimal effective dose in order to expose the person just enough to this to keep this technical proficiency, but not go too far into it so it exacerbates any fatigue that is being accumulated. And then think horizontal pressing movement that is going to stress pecs, shoulders, triceps. What's a horizontal pressing movement that does that? Any goddamn thing that you have in the gym, you can do a chest press, dumbbell incline, dumbbell flat bench, pause, neutral grip, whatever the fuck you want, superset, chest fly into deficit push-ups. I don't fucking know. What literally dealer's choice at that point. And then as the coach or the athlete who's taking the step back and understanding, okay, this is the caveat to this situation. This is the context to the situation. And this is the real outcome. It's not just, I want to make my bench press stronger. How do I do that? Technical proficiency, muscles stronger. That's the easiest way to dumb it down. How do I get technical proficiency? Got that. Check that box. Tempo work, pause work, technique, working with a coach. Great. How do I make the muscles stronger? Go to the gym, find movements that don't hurt you and that you can run as fucking hard and long as you possibly can, and then just run those motherfuckers.
Right. Like, and for me, like, one of the things that I've just really, it was a big game changer was doing this less squatting in general, just doing like more belt squat and like more
Mm-hmm.
half squat, just leg extensions. Like I can, like I said, I'm really bent over. And so heavy squats is like a back exercise, not like a leg exercise. And for me, it's like, what's my big limiter? It's not my technique, it's my muscle mass. What do I
Mm-hmm.
need to get bigger? Muscle mass. Well, how do I do that? Okay, you have to eat more food and you have to do probably exercises in line in my case that are going to stress that muscle a little bit better. And for somebody like you who is already, incredibly jacked, probably needs to focus a little bit more on the whole neurological adaptation thing. And because you've been doing this for so long, you probably just need less in general than most people, also because of your incredible levels of absolute strength. One of the things I've always asked myself as a thought experiment is what if maybe our bodies as we age, as you mentioned, you get more wear and tear or more chronic aches and pains. What if that's what we should have been doing like all along as like beginners and just have like accepted that like slower progress and like and just milk that for a long period of time. Like I've always wondered that. Maybe that's like Mother Nature's way of saying like this is what you should have been doing all along, and now you're only just stumbling upon that.
Problem with that though, buddy, that doesn't get clicks or shares or anything on Instagram, and it's not fun. The fun aspect is the big thing that I think people fall into, because I mean, believe me, like right now I'm looking at another 6-12 months of like, well, I'm just going to get away from the barbell, build some muscle mass, and like get back to it when I can get back to it. But at that point I will have not been on the platform for like over 3 years. That's not fun. It's not enjoyable, but it is absolutely better or more guaranteed to be more better based on a long-term developmental perspective. But tell 14-year-old Joe or 20-year-old Adam or whoever's listening to this, be like, I promise you, this is going to be better in the long run, but you're going to fucking hate it and be bored for 5 years. That person would hear it, be like, all right, I hear you. That's cool. But like, I
Yeah.
don't want to do that, you know? So it's like I do think like I mean shit, have you seen any of those memes where it's like were my parents always right? They told me I should just go outside, drink water, take a walk, get in
Yeah.
the sun and like go to bed at a reasonable hour.
Yeah.
That's my fucking ideal Tuesday after or Tuesday night as a 31-year-old. They tell me that at 16 and I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah. Sleepover.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really, really good, way to put it. But Joe, really want to thank you for donating your time and coming on. I really enjoyed talking to you and getting your perspective on these the discussion points. So if people want to follow you or hire you for coaching, where should they head?
I am super easy to find on the internet. It's Joe Sullivan _ AOD on Instagram and TikTok. I'm more on Instagram than anything else. I can barely handle one social media as it is, but DMs are always open. DMs are the probably the easiest way to get me there. I also have a Calendly that you can book with on my Instagram page and my website, which has an email me button, which is the aodcollective.com. Any one of those avenues, I'm very responsive. I'm chronically online like everyone else in this space. So just get a hold of me somewhere or somehow in that manner, and we'll talk. So I appreciate you having me, Adam.
No, this is a lot of fun. So I'll make sure I include all of those details in the show notes. And thank you guys for listening.